What's going on, everybody? It is about 5 till, and I right now am just going to drop in the link here for everybody on Facebook, anyways. And that is right here. You can jump in online and join it with us. And so we're going to be getting started here in about 5 minutes. So I was just going to say, if you're watching, let me know where you're watching from. Maybe share this video. We're going to be doing this, pretty much every weekday at about 12:30, just jumping online, doing some prayer. Today, we're actually going to be talking about and having a prayer for opportunity. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means here in a second. I did want to encourage you, if you have not yet seen a video, a friend of mine in ministry, Kurt Skelly, has put out, and he dealt with, kind of like directly head on yesterday, the issue of racism. I think it'll level all of us, especially if you're a pastor, you're a ministry leader, you're certainly talking about this and engaging with this idea. Even if you're doing expository preaching, like we're doing that right now, we're going verse by verse through the book of Jude. And yet at the same time, I find myself in the application just applying it there because it needs to be. And so I would love to hear, how you're tackling that. If you're a friend of mine and you're in the ministry, full-time ministry, I'd love to hear, how you're doing that. Even if you're not watching this live, like if you're just catching this later, I'd love to hear how you are maybe tackling that issue. Maybe you're doing it topically. Maybe you're doing it verse by verse. Maybe you're going through a different book of the Bible than I am, but you're finding yourself applying in the same way. In what ways are you applying the truth? Like, what are you finding as the common applications that you're putting before your people? Because certainly that's a responsibility we have to do. And certainly it's a hot topic as well. I've also heard some other, people talking about, hey, if you're not going to a church right now that's dealing with racism and oppression and all this sorts of stuff, you need to find another church. I would just say, I think that's like just dangerous rhetoric. I think that's super, polarizing. If you're in a good church and they're going verse by verse through a book of the Bible, maybe there's a need to apply some of that stuff, but I don't think that's grounds for finding another church. If they're faithfully teaching and preaching the gospel, the Bible, then that's you're in a good place. And it might be certainly appropriate to dialogue and have a conversation about in person over coffee, maybe, but to ask people to derail their faithfulness ministry, because preaching is not just about talking specifically about all the cultural things that are going on. Though the Bible speaks into all that stuff, certainly we need to be aware that we're not just simply to not derail, but to simply always just chase after all the societal woes individually. I think the gospel and the breadth of scripture, wherever you're at, are going to be able to speak into those relevant issues. So got about a minute here. And so I just want to encourage you, don't listen to polarizing voices like that come in and say, hey, if your pastor's not doing this, your pastor's not doing that, like you need to find another pastor. Well, let's also talk about like faithfulness. Okay, let's talk about what that looks like, not just from the pulpit side of stuff, but let's also talk about what that looks like from a congregational standpoint as well. So about a minute away. If you got a prayer request, I'd encourage you to drop that in as well. Again, if you're watching with us, let me know where you're watching from. If you have a prayer request or a prayer need, please let us know. Please let me know about that as well. And it could be something, bad that you're going through. It could also be something positive you're hopeful for. I've oftentimes reminded our people that, hey, prayer is not really just always all about what we want in the here and now, right? Prayer is also, it's formative, it's formative. It's also certainly it produces things in the here and now by God answering prayers and directing prayers, but it's also something that really is primarily concerned with changing us on the inside, spiritual formation. So today as we think about, prayer and talked a little bit, mentioned, what we're going to be talking about today is a prayer of opportunity. And what do we mean by that? A prayer for opportunity. I don't know about you, but it's a little frustrating to hear voices, hear people talk about, if you're talking one way or if you're talking another way, or you're just using these terms, it's so you're avoiding activity. It's so you're avoiding interaction. It's you're avoiding engagement, and I really don't think anybody, whatever the terms you're using, I don't really think anybody, especially in the Christian perspective, and certainly in the Christian leadership's perspective, is trying to talk about stuff for the purpose of talking about stuff. I do think it can be very difficult to figure out specifically where that action needs to land. Like, what do I need to put my energy into to address these things? What is it that needs to be done? What needs to be, like, what motion, what action needs to be generated to not be, because I don't think anybody wants to be just a talking head right now. We want to put feet to action on these issues that are being touted, and these issues that are concerning in our culture right now. So, I as a ministry leader, as a Christian, having a dialogue is not to further avoid action; it's to facilitate, I think, more precise action. And so it has been a little bit frustrating to have people talk about, well, the reason you're mentioning this is because you don't care. Like, basically, if you're not driving to Hollywood or driving to a downtown area and engaging with tens of thousands of people to walk up a street in solidarity and protest, and somehow you're not doing anything, which actually couldn't be further from the truth. Like, the voice is needed and the voice is appropriate, and sure, change needs to happen. But let's talk about the breadth of this issue is not, just to be found and dealt with, in the main public streets of a downtown area. And so when we talk about a prayer for opportunity, what I mean to drive at today is that as a pastor, as a preacher of the gospel, I believe that all of this is something that the gospel has to deal with, must deal with, and is certainly able to deal with. This the racism, brutality, and we could go to a lot of other social issues. But what I mean to say is that social issues are not only social issues; they are issues that need to be addressed with the gospel. And I know, and what I'm not saying, right? I'm not saying it's not a skin issue, it's a sin issue, though that's, obviously this is true. What I But I also understand how that can be taken, and it's certainly not how I want it to be taken. Is that, like, hey, we don't need to be acting and voting and changing stuff. We just need to, you know, talk about the sin. What I mean by that is, we talk about a prayer of opportunity, is that there is this is a fundamentally, this is a heart issue. Racism, right? And we've heard this said, there's only one race, right? The human race. So racism is at its core a disdain from within the heart of an individual towards another person. It's hatred for an individual that is predicated on something just ridiculous. And so, and I can speak. Look, I grew up in the Southeast, so this is not saying racism isn't an issue. I mean, I know racism is an issue. Okay, I've been in conversations that were racist. I've I myself have propagated ideas and been a part of things that, looking back, we're like, yeah, that was racist. Maybe know it at the time, not necessarily, but what I mean to say is that racism is an issue. It's not that racism isn't an issue, but the cure, right? The thing that will fundamentally change this hatred towards another individual is to recognize the gospel, and is to believe the gospel, that truth, that this is a sin that is festering up and erupting in my heart, in myself, in the hearts of these people. It is something that the gospel can and does address, because it is only the creator's work that can recreate a heart, that can recreate an individual. And so when we talk about